The Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-25 is a supersonic interceptor and reconnaissance aircraft that was among the fastest military aircraft to enter service. It was designed by the Soviet Union's Mikoyan-Gurevich Bureau primarily using stainless steel, one of the few combat aircraft to do so. It was the last plane designed by Mikhail Gurevich before his retirement. The first prototype flew in 1964, and the aircraft entered service in 1970. It has an operational top speed of Mach 2.83, and features a powerful radar and 4 air-to-air missiles. When first seen in reconnaissance photography, the large wing suggested an enormous and highly maneuverable fighter, at a time when U.S. design theories were also evolving towards higher maneuverability due to combat performance in the Vietnam War. The appearance of the MiG-25 sparked serious concern in the West and prompted dramatic increases in performance from the McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle, then under development in the late 1960s. The capabilities of the MiG-25 were better understood in 1976 when Soviet pilot Viktor Belenko defected in a MiG-25 to the United States via Japan. It turned out that the aircraft's weight necessitated its large wings. Production of the MiG-25 series ended in 1984 after completion of 1,190 aircraft. A symbol of the Cold War, the MiG-25 flew with Soviet allies and former Soviet republics, remaining in limited service in Russia and several other nations. It is one of the highest-flying military aircraft, and the second fastest after the State Route 71 reconnaissance aircraft. Design and development. Background: during the Cold War, Soviet Air Defense Forces (PVO) was given the task of strategic air defense of the USSR. In the decades after World War II, this meant not only dealing with accidental border violations, but more importantly defending the vast airspace of the USSR against U.S. reconnaissance aircraft and strategic bombers carrying free-fall nuclear bombs. The performance of these types of aircraft was steadily improved. Overflights by the very high-altitude American Lockheed U-2 in the late 1950s revealed a need for higher-altitude interceptor aircraft than currently available. The subsonic Boeing B-47 Stratojet and Boeing B-52 Stratofortress strategic bombers were followed by the Mach 2 Convair B-58 Hustler, with the Mach 3 North American B-70 Valkyrie on the drawing board at the time. A major upgrade in the PVO defense system was required, and at the start of 1958 a requirement was issued for manned interceptors capable of reaching 3,000 km/h and heights of up to 27 km. Mikoyan and Sukhoi responded. The Mikoyan-Gurevich OKB had been working on a series of interceptors during the second half of the 1950s. The I-1, I-3U, I-7U, I-75, U-150, U-150A, U-152, U-152A, U-152P, and U-152M. The U-150 was noteworthy because it was built specifically to test the Tumansky R-15 engine, 2 of which would later be used for the MiG-25. This led to U-152, alternatively known as U-166, which set several world records. The U-152M was intended to be the definite heavy interceptor design, but before it was finished, the PVO had selected the Tupolev Tu-128. As the work on the MiG-25 was well underway, the single-engine U-152M was abandoned. designing a new interceptor. Work on the new Soviet interceptor that became the MiG-25 started in mid-1959, a year before Soviet intelligence learned of the American Mach 3 A-12 reconnaissance aircraft. It is not clear if the design was influenced by the American A-5 Vigilante. The Design Bureau studied several possible layouts for the new aircraft. One had the engines located side by side, as on the MiG-19. The second had a stepped arrangement with one engine amidships, with exhaust under the fuselage, and another in the aft fuselage. The third project had an engine arrangement similar to that of the English Electric Lightning, with two engines stacked vertically. Option 2 and 3 were both rejected because the size of the engines meant any of them would result in a very tall aircraft which would complicate maintenance. The idea of placing the engines in underwing nacelles was also rejected because of the dangers of any thrust asymmetry during flight. Having decided on engine configuration, there was thought of giving the machine variable sweep wings and a second crew member, a navigator. Variable geometry would improve maneuverability at subsonic speed, but at the cost of decreased fuel tank capacity, because the reconnaissance aircraft would operate at high speed and high altitude. The idea was soon dropped. Another interesting but impractical idea was to improve the field performance using two RD-36-35 lift jets. Vertical takeoff and landing would allow for use of damaged runways during wartime and was studied on both sides of the Iron Curtain. The perennial problem with engines dedicated to vertical lift is they become mere deadweight in horizontal flight, and also occupy space in the airframe needed for fuel. The MiG interceptor would need all the fuel it could get, so the idea was abandoned. The first prototype was a reconnaissance variant, designated U-155R1, that made its first flight on 6 March 1964. It had some characteristics that were unique to that prototype, and some of these were visually very evident. The wings had fixed wingtip tanks to which small winglets were attached for stability purposes, but when it was found that fuel sloshing around in the tanks caused vibrations, they were eliminated. The aircraft also had attachments for movable foreplanes, canards, to help with pitch control at high speed. The first flight of the interceptor prototype, U-155P1, took place on 9 September 1964. Development of the MiG-25, which represented a major step forward in Soviet aerodynamics, engineering and metallurgy, took several more years to complete. On 9 July 1967, the new aircraft was first shown to the public at the Domodedovo Air Show, with 4 prototypes making a fly-past record breaker. The Mikoyan-Gurevich Design Bureau soon realized that the performance of the new aircraft gave it great potential to set new flight records. In addition to the normal duties, the prototypes U-155P1, U-155R1, U-155R3 were made lighter by removing some unneeded equipment, and were used for these attempts. Under Federation Aeronauticae International classification, the U-155 type belonged to Class C1, which specifies jet-powered land planes with unlimited maximum takeoff weight. Records set included: the first claim was for world speed records with no payload and payloads of 1,000 and 2,000 kilograms. MiG-OK chief test pilot Alexander V. Fedorov reached an average speed of 2,319.12 km per hour over a 1,000 km circuit on 16 March 1965. For pure speed, with no payload, test pilot Mikhail M. Komarov averaged 2,981.5 km per hour over a 500 km closed circuit on 5 October 1967. On the same day, Fedotov reached an altitude of 29,977 meters with a 1,000-kilogram payload. The MiG eventually became the first aircraft to go higher than 35,000 meters. Time-to-height records were recorded on the 4th of June 1973 when Boris A. Orlov climbed to 20,000 meters in 2 minutes 49.8 sec. The same day, Pyotr Ostapenko reached 25,000 meters in 3 minutes 12.6 seconds, 30,000 meters in 4 minutes 3.86 sec. On the 25th of July 1973, Fedotov reached 35,230 meters with 1,000 kilograms payload and 36,240 meters with no load. In the thin air, the engines flamed out and the aircraft coasted in a ballistic trajectory by inertia alone. At the apex the speed had dropped to 75 km per hour. On the 31st of August 1977, U-266M, again flown by Fedotov, set the recognized absolute altitude record for a jet aircraft under its own power. He reached 37,650 meters at Podmostovnoye, USSR in zoom climb. The aircraft was actually a MiG-25RB re-engined with the powerful R-15B F2-300. It had earlier been part of the program to improve the aircraft's top speed that resulted in the MiG-25M prototype. In all 29 records were claimed, of which 7 were all-time world records for time-to-height, altitudes of 20,000 meters and higher, and speed. Several records still stand. Technical description: because of the thermal stresses incurred in flight above Mach 2, the Mikoyan-Gurevich OKB had difficulties choosing what materials to use for the aircraft. They had to use E2 heat-resistant plexiglass for the canopy, and high-strength stainless steel for the wings and fuselage. Using titanium rather than steel would have been ideal, but it was expensive and difficult to work with. The problem of cracks in welded titanium structures with thin walls could not be solved, so the heavier nickel steel was used instead. It cost far less than titanium and allowed for welding, along with heat-resistant seals. The MiG-25 was constructed from 80% nickel steel alloy, 11% aluminum, and 9% titanium. The steel components were formed by a combination of spot welding, automatic machine welding, and hand arc welding methods. Initially, the interceptor version was equipped with the TL-25 Smerch A radar, a development of the system carried by the earlier Tu-128. While powerful and thus long-ranged and resistant to jamming, the system, due to the age of its design and its intended purpose, lacked look-down, shoot-down capability, which limited its effectiveness against low-flying targets. By the time the MiG-25 entered service in 1969, this was a serious shortcoming, as strategic bombing doctrine was shifting towards low-level penetration of enemy territory. After Belenko's defection to Japan exposed this flaw to the West, a government decree issued on November 4, 1976 called for urgent development of a more advanced radar. This resulted in the Pulse Doppler radar Sapphire 25 system fitted to the MiG-25 PD variant. Automatic Control System SAO-155-1 or SAO-155-1. Navigation System Peleng-D Heat Radar 26-1. Radio Guidance System Laser Direction Finder ARC-10. Altimeter Great Heights RV-18 SPO. Sirena 3M or LO-06. Birch Control System Air Intake 2-Way System Range Radio Navigation RSB BN6C Coral Marker Radio MCI56 Intercom SPU7. The respondent CO63B System of Air Signals SVSMO5 Voice Informer RE65 Voice Recorder MS61 and others on late production was installed SEC. Rainbow. All interceptors installed. Palais 1I, consisting of the electronic systems of navigation and landing, air signals and systems of the automatic flight control. The spies were established. Photographic equipment and 70 or A72 station electronic intelligence Cube 3M Sabre. Side-looking airborne radar, the station of signals intelligence virage or pitch. Armament interceptor includes 4 supersonic great-range R4OT air-to-air missiles with thermal homing hidden R4OP with semi-active radar, guidance system, under the fuselage and suspended fuel tank. The aircraft could carry unguided gravity bombs in a rudimentary strike capability, as the bombs would weigh no more and incur no more drag than its regular load of R-40 missiles. Its performance was not impaired, leading to some impressive bombing feats when released at an altitude of 20,000 meters and a speed above Mach 2. A 500 kilograms bomb would have a glide range of several tens of kilometers. The MiG-25 was theoretically capable of a maximum speed of Mach 3+ and a ceiling of 90,000 feet. Its high speed was problematic, although sufficient thrust was available to reach Mach 3.2. A limit of Mach 2.83 had to be imposed as the turbines tended to overspeed and overheat at higher speeds, possibly damaging them beyond repair. Into production. Full-scale production of the MiG-25R began in 1969 at the Gorky Aircraft Factory. The MiG-25P followed in 1971, and 460 of this variant was built until production ended in 1982. The improved PDE variant that replaced it was built from 1978 till 1984 with 104 aircraft completed. But from then on the Gorky factory switched over production to the new MiG-31. Western intelligence and the MiG-25 inaccurate intelligence analysis caused the West initially to believe the MiG-25 was an agile air combat fighter, rather than an interceptor. In response, the United States started a new program which resulted in the McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle. NATO obtained a better understanding of the MiG-25's capabilities on 6 September 1976, when a Soviet Air Defense Forces pilot LT. Viktor Belenko defected, landing his MiG-25P at Hakodate Airport in Japan. The pilot overshot the runway on landing and damaged the front landing gear. Despite Soviet protests, the Japanese invited U.S. Air Force personnel to investigate the aircraft. On 25 September, it was moved by a C-5A transport to a base in central Japan, where it was carefully dismantled and analyzed. After 67 days, the aircraft was returned by ship to the Soviets in pieces. The aircraft was reassembled and is now on display at the So.It plant in Nizhny Novgorod. The analysis, based on technical manuals and ground tests of engines and avionics, revealed unusual technical information. Belenko's particular aircraft was brand new, representing the latest Soviet technology. The aircraft was assembled quickly, and was essentially built around its massive Tumansky R-15 turbojets. Welding was done by hand. Rivets with non-flush heads were used in areas that would not cause adverse aerodynamic drag. The aircraft was built of a nickel-steel alloy and not titanium as was assumed. The steel construction contributed to the craft's high 29,000 kilograms unarmed weight. Maximum acceleration rating was just 2.2 grams with full fuel tanks, with an absolute limit of 4.5 5 grams. One MiG-25 withstood an inadvertent 11.5 grams pull during low-altitude dogfight training, but the resulting deformation damaged the airframe beyond repair. Combat radius was 299 kilometers, and maximum range on internal fuel was only 1,197 kilometers at low altitude. The airspeed indicator was redlined at Mach 2.8, with typical intercept speeds near Mach 2.5 in order to extend the service life of the engines. A MiG-25 was tracked flying over Sinai at Mach 3.2 in the early 1970s, but the flight led to the engines being damaged beyond repair. The majority of the onboard avionics were based on vacuum tube technology, not solid-state electronics. Although they represented aging technology, vacuum tubes were more tolerant of temperature extremes, thereby removing the need for environmental controls in the avionics bays. With the use of vacuum tubes, the MiG-25P's original Smerch A radar had enormous power, about 600 kilowatts. As with most Soviet aircraft, the MiG-25 was designed to be as robust as possible. The use of vacuum tubes also made the aircraft's systems resistant to an electromagnetic pulse, for example after a nuclear blast. Later versions, as the result of Belenko's defection and the compromise of the MiG-25P's radar and missile systems beginning in 1976, the Soviets started to develop an advanced version, the MiG-25PD. Plans for a new aircraft to develop the Foxbat's potential to go faster than the in-service limit of Mach 2.8 were designed as a flying prototype. Unofficially designated MiG-25M, it had new powerful engines R-15BF 2-300, improved radar, and missiles. This work never resulted in a machine for series production, as the coming MiG-31 showed more promise. Operational history. Soviet Union. The unarmed B version had greater impact than the Interceptor when the USSR sent 2 MiG-25R and 2 MiG-25RB to Egypt in March 1971 and stayed until July 1972. They were operated by the Soviet 63rd Independent Air Detachment set up specially for this mission. Det-63 flew over Israeli-held territory in Sinai on reconnaissance missions roughly 20 times. The flights were in pairs at maximum speed and high altitude. On 6 November 1971, a Soviet MiG-25 operating out of Egypt flying at Mach 2.5 was met by Israeli F-4S and fired upon unsuccessfully. A MiG-25 was tracked flying over Sinai at Mach 3.2 during this period. The MiG-25 engines went into overspeed, which led to them being scrapped. Unit Det-63 was sent back home in 1972. The reconnaissance Foxbats were sent back to Egypt in 1920 October 1973 during the Yom Kippur War. Unit Det-154 remained there until late 1974. During the 1970s, the Soviet Air Force conducted reconnaissance overflights across Iran using its MiG-25 RBSH aircraft in response to joint US-Iran recon operations. The Swedish Air Force observed via radar a Soviet air defense MiG-25 at 63,000 feet trailed 2.9 kilometers behind the Lockheed State Route 71 Blackbird at 72,000 feet, over the Baltic Sea in the 1980s. Syria. On 13 February 1981, the Israeli Air Force sent 2 RF-4S over Lebanon as decoys for Syrian MiG-25 interceptors. As the MiG scrambled, the RF-4S turned back, delivering chaff and using ECM pods. 2 IDF AF-F-15s were waiting from the MiGs and shot one of them down with AIM-7F missiles. The other MiG was able to escape. In a similar engagement, on 29 July 1981, a Syrian MiG-25 was again downed by an Israeli F-15A, after which a second MiG-25 launched its R-40 missiles at the F-15 and its wingmen, but they missed. However, other sources state the missiles hit and downed one of the F-15s. On 31 August 1982, a third Syrian MiG-25 was damaged by an Israeli Hawk SAM and then destroyed by an F-15. Iraq-Iran-Iraq War. The MiG-25 was in service with the Iraqi Air Force during the Iran-Iraq War. On 19 March 1982, an Iranian F-4E was badly damaged by a missile fired by an Iraqi MiG-25. Iraqi MiG-25s made another kill against Iran in February 1983, when an Iraqi MiG-25 PD shot down an Iranian C-130. In April 1984, an Iraqi MiG-25 PD shot down an Iranian F-5E. On 21 March 1984, an Iraqi MiG-25 PD shot down an Iranian F-4E, and on 5 June 1985, an Iraqi MiG-25 PD shot down a second Iranian F-4E. On 23 February 1986, an Iraqi MiG-25 PD shot down an Iranian DC-130, and on 10 June an RF-4E. Later in October 1986, an Iraqi MiG-25 PDS shot down a second RF-4E. The most successful Iraqi MiG-25 pilot of the war was Colonel Mohammad Rayyan, who was credited with 10 kills. 8 of these were while flying the MiG-25P from 1981 to 1986. In 1986, after attaining the rank of colonel, Rayyan was shot down and killed by Iranian F-14s. For the majority of the air combat, Iraqi pilots used R-40 missiles. On 3 May 1981, an Iraqi MiG-25 PD shot down an Algerian Gulfstream III. On 2 October 1986, an Iraqi MiG-25 PD shot down a Syrian MiG-21 RF. According to research by journalist Tom Cooper, at least 10 MiG-25s may have been shot down by Iranian F-14s during the Iran-Iraq War. Only 3 MiG-25 losses were confirmed by Iraq. Persian Gulf War. During the Persian Gulf War, a U.S. Navy F-A-18, piloted by LTCDR Scott Spiker, was shot down on the first night of the war by a missile fired by a MiG-25. The kill was reportedly made with a Bisnovat R-4 missile fired from a MiG-25 PDS flown by LT Zahir Dawood of the 84th Squadron of the IQAF. 2 IQAF MiG-25s were shot down by U.S. Air Force F-15s on January 19. The MiGs attempted to hide from the F-15s by using chaff and electronic jammers in order to engage the F-15s undetected. However, the F-15 pilots were able to reacquire the 2 Iraqi MiG-25s and shot both down with AIM-7 Sparrow missiles. In another incident, an Iraqi MiG-25 PD, after eluding 8 US AF F-15s at long range, fired 3 missiles at General Dynamics EF-111A Raven electronic warfare aircraft, forcing them to abort the mission and leave attacking aircraft without electronic jamming support. In a different incident, 2 MiG-25s approached a pair of F-15s, fired missiles at long range which were evaded by the F-15s, and then outran the American fighters. 2 more F-15s joined the pursuit, and a total of 10 air-to-air missiles were fired at the MiG-25s, though none reached them. According to the same sources, at least one F-111 was also forced to abort its mission by a MiG-25 on the first 24 hours of hostilities, during an air raid over Tikrit. After the war, on the 27th of December 1992, a U.S. F-160 downed a MiG-25 that violated the no-fly zone in southern Iraq with an AIM-120 AMRAAM missile. It was the first U.S. F-16 air-to-air victory and the first AMRAAM kill. On the 23rd of December 2002, an Iraqi MiG-25 shot down a U.S. Air Force unmanned MQ-1 Predator drone, which was performing armed reconnaissance over Iraq. This was the first time in history that an aircraft and an unmanned drone had engaged in combat. Predators had been armed with AIM-92 Stinger air-to-air missiles, and were being used to bait Iraqi fighter aircraft, then run. In this incident, the Predator did not run, but instead fired one of the Stingers, which missed, while the MiG's missile did not. No Iraqi aircraft were deployed in the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003, with most Iraqi aircraft being hidden or destroyed on the ground. In August 2003, several dozen Iraqi aircraft were discovered buried in the sand. India. The MiG-25 was kept a guarded secret in India, designated Garuda after the large bird-like creature from Hindu and Buddhist scriptures. It was used extensively in the Kargil War and Operation Parakram, conducting aerial reconnaissance sorties over Pakistan. In May 1997, an Indian Air Force Mikoyan MiG-25 reconnaissance aircraft created a furore when the pilot flew faster than Mach 2 over Pakistani territory. Following a reconnaissance mission into Pakistan airspace, the MiG-25 broke the sound barrier while flying at an altitude of around 65,000 feet, otherwise the mission would have remained covert. At least to the general public, the Pakistani government contended that the breaking of the sound barrier was a deliberate attempt to make the point that the Pakistan Air Force had no aircraft in its inventory that could come close to the MiG-25's cruising altitude. India denied the incident, but Pakistan's Foreign Minister, Gohar Ayub Khan, believed that the Foxbat photographed strategic installations near the capital, Islamabad. Lack of spare parts and India's acquisition of unmanned aerial vehicles and satellite imagery eventually led to its retirement in 2006. Libya. Libya was a major user of the MiG-25 as it imported 96 MiG-25 PD Interceptor, MiG-25 Putrain and MiG-25 RBK reconnaissance aircraft in the late 1970s and early 1980s. During the 1980s, Libya confronted the United States over some claims over the extension of its territorial waters. These incidents prompted a number of encounters between the opposing forces, as it happened during the Gulf of Sidra incident, with the Libyan MiG-25s taking part in them. During the following years, the Libyan MiG-25 fleet was grounded, lacking maintenance, as MiG-25 airframes were grounded for several years. NATO attacks spared them during the Libyan civil war. In 2014 and 2015, the Libyan forces under the new General National Congress controlled a number of former LARAF airframes that were retired and stored before the Libyan civil war in 2011, among them a number of MiG-25s. Technicians started working on some of the airframes to push them back to service in the fight against the opposing internationally recognized Libyan government forces. On the 6th of May 2015, a new General National Congress MiG-25 crashed near Zintan while attacking the civilian airport controlled by the opposing internationally recognized Libyan government. The pilot ejected and was captured by opposing forces, which also claimed they downed the jet. The jet was at one of its first flights after re-entering service.